Rebellions are a potent and prevalent threat in Sub-Saharan Africa. Rebels' activities have led to the murder of tens of thousands of people across the continent, forces millions into refugee camps, and often leave countries deprived of civic and political order. Analysts believe they would become considerably more common on the continent as African people grow increasingly dissatisfied with ineffective, corrupt, and in most cases, sit-tight regimes. In this edition of Hisple Media, we bring to your view 5 most prominent rebel militia groups in Africa. Please stay with me. We begin at number 5, Alliance of Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Congo Zaire. The Alliance of Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Congo Zaire (ADFL) was a coalition of Rwandan, Ugandan, Burundian, and Congolese dissidents, disgruntled minority groups, and nations that fought to overthrow the government of Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire. The alliance was able to remove Mobutu and installed Laurent Desire Kabila as president of Congo Zaire. Although the coalition was successful in deposing Mobutu, the alliance fell apart when Laurent Kabila refused to be dictated to by his foreign sponsors, Rwanda and Uganda. This triggered the Second Congo War in 1998. Following the Rwandan genocide in 1994, hundreds of thousands of ethnic Hutus fled through the border into Zaire and settled in vast refugee camps. Many of those responsible for the genocide, including the former Rwandan armed forces, the FAR, and Interahamwe militia, reorganized into the rebel group Republican Rally for Democracy in Rwanda, the RDR. The RDR started using the camps as location to infiltrate across the border and carry out insurgent operations. However, despite protests from Rwanda, the Zairean government and international humanitarian organizations were unwilling to remove the militias from the refugee camps. At the same time, the population of the Banyamulenge minority, ethnic Tutsis who had lived in Zaire for generations, was growing precarious. And crisis came to a head when on October 7, 1996, the vice governor based in the Kivu town of Bukavu proclaimed that the Banyamulenge were no longer welcomed and would have to leave the country. But in response to this, the Banyamulenge began an uprising against the local government, which was used as a pretext by the ADFL to start a war in Zaire. With support from the government of Rwanda, the Banyamulenge managed to fend off an attack by the Zairean armed forces. Laurent Desire Kabila, a former Marxist rebel who had spent the previous decade marketing gold in Tanzania, resurfaced, seemingly out of nowhere, as the leader of his defunct rebel group, the Party of the People's Revolution. Kabila found himself at the helm of the new group, the AFDL, which was a coalition of other rebel groups. The AFDL captured towns along the Zairean border and dispersed the massive Hutu refugee camps that were providing shelter to numerous RDR rebels, a conduct that humanitarian and human rights groups strongly condemned. A humanitarian crisis of monumental proportion was created. However, in mid-November, heavy fighting pushed the Zairean government troops and RDR out of the provinces of North and South Kivu. The Hutu refugees subsequently separated, with around 800,000 returning to Rwanda and several 100,000 traveling west into the Zairean forest, where many died of malnutrition and exposure to the weather or were attacked by different armed organizations. During the war, however, the Rwandan Defense Force and the AFDL committed enormous crimes, with up to 222,000 Rwandan Hutu refugees going missing. Mobutu fled the country on May 16, 1997, following 7 months of insurrection and the collapse of peace negotiations. This gave room for the AFDL to march into Kinshasa the next day. Kabila took power and renamed the country the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, and the AFDL was thus designated as the new National Armed Forces. At number 4, the National Resistance Army. The National Resistance Army, the NRA, was a rebel force that launched a guerrilla war against the government of Milton Obote and subsequently Tito Okello in Uganda. It was the military wing of the National Resistance Movement, the NRM, and participated in the Ugandan Bush War or the Luwero War. Muammar Gaddafi was an active supporter of the NRA. Following the victory of the Ugandan People's Congress in the highly disputed 1980 general elections, Yoweri Museveni, the then head of the Ugandan Patriotic Movement Party, alleged electoral fraud and declared an armed rebellion. This led to the formation of the NRA in 1981 when Yoweri Museveni's Popular Resistance Army, the PRA, merged with an ex-president Yusuf Lule's Ugandan Freedom Fighters, the UFF. Yoweri Museveni would lead the NRA to victory over the Ugandan government forces, the Ugandan National Liberation Army, the UNLA, in 1986. By the time the triumphant NRA stormed Kampala in 1986, over a fifth of its 16,000 troops were Banyarwanda, and Fred Rwigema was its deputy leader. From 1986 until 1990, the Museveni dictatorship attempted to put a stop to numerous insurgencies and regain control of the army. But insurgent activities persisted, particularly in the north, the east, and the west. In April 1988, 3,000 former Ugandan People's Army, the UPA fighters, and members of numerous other minor rebel groups surrendered and declared their support for the regime of Yoweri Museveni, resulting in a government amnesty. Although the NRA later absorbed many UPA and UPDA personnel, hundreds of others rejected the peace path and continued to fight the NRA. Following the adoption of the Ugandan Constitution in 1995, the NRA was renamed the Ugandan People's Defense Force. At number 3, the National Patriotic Front of Liberia. The National Patriotic Front of Liberia, the NPFL, was a Liberian rebel group that initiated and took part in the First Liberian Civil War, which lasted from December 24, 1989 until August 2, 1997. The NFL emerged as a result of escalating ethnic tensions and civil unrest caused by tyranny, corruption, and favoritism by the government of Liberia that was led by Samuel K. Doe. The ethnic Crowns people were majorly favored by the government. The NFL invaded Liberia through the border between Ivory Coast and Nimba County in Liberia and was led by Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was the head of the military wing of the NPFL, while Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was the international coordinator and Tom Wewuyu doubles as the defense minister and spokesperson of the group. According to estimates, the National Patriotic Front of Liberia had 25,000 combatants and was involved in a variety of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including but not limited to massacre, sexual violence, forced recruitment of child soldiers, mutilations, torture, kidnapping, and political assassinations. Its leader, Charles Taylor, has been convicted of war crimes and is currently serving his jail term at the HM Prison Frontline in County Durham, England. At number 2, the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed sprang from a long-running civil conflict in one of Sudan's neighbors, Chad. However, in 1980, Libya, another neighbor, intervened in the war. Libya was said to have provided material support to Arab nomads in eastern Chad to bolster its forces in the region. Meanwhile, across the border in Darfur, Sudanese government sent rifles and ammunition to Arabic-speaking Abala nomads, enlisting them to act as deterrent to Chadian incursions into Sudan at the time. These two groups would subsequently grow into the Janjaweed. Although a treaty ended Libyan intervention in Chad in 1987, civil war had returned in Sudan by then, as sporadic fighting between the south and north gave birth to a full-fledged revolt in 1983. The overlapping conflict created a consistent environment in which the militias could operate. Throughout the 1990s, militias invaded communities along the Chadian border, although the violence stemmed mostly from confrontation between farmers and pastoralists over land and water rights. The attitude of the Sudanese government in Khartoum towards the militias ranged from tacit support to benevolent neglect, as the government did little to halt the banditry in which the militias engaged. Beginning in 2002, rebels from Darfur sedentary agriculturalist population protesting against unfair treatment by the Arab-dominated Sudanese government launched strikes on government installations. The Sudanese armed forces retaliated with devastating aerial bombardment of rebel strongholds. But in April 2003, two of the most prominent rebel groups, the Justice and Equity Movement (JEM) and the Sudan Liberation Army (SLA), mounted a joint raid on the Sudanese air base at Al-Fashir, destroying aircraft and capturing dozens of people. In response to this attack, the Arab militias, now referred to collectively as the Janjaweed, were organized as a counter-insurgency force. They routed the SLA and conducted what was described by international observers as an ethnic cleansing of the four Masalit and Zagawa peoples. A typical Janjaweed raid would open with an attack by the Sudanese Air Force with helicopter gunships or Antonov bombers targeting civilian settlements. Within hours, mounted Janjaweed fighters will sweep into the area, killing and mutilating men, raping the women, and killing or kidnapping the children. The raiders would then destroy the basic necessities of village life, burning fields and houses, poisoning wells, and seizing anything of value. Between 2003 and 2008, hundreds of thousands were killed and millions were displaced as the Janjaweed targeted civilian populations across Darfur. However, a combination of AU and UN peacekeeping forces of about 22,000 was able to curtail the Janjaweed activities in Darfur region in 2008. But there are still reported attacks by the Janjaweed in the region. And finally, at number 1, the Lord's Resistance Army. The Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA, is a Ugandan militia that operates along the borders of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, the Central African Republic, CAR, and South Sudan. In 1988, Joseph Kony founded the LRA with the aim of restoring the honor of his ethnic Akoli people and establishing a government based on his unique interpretation of the Ten Commandments. He claimed that various spirits have directed him to depose the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni. But under his command, the LRA rebels engaged in violence for the sake of violence, particularly against civilians, rather than fighting to accomplish a political purpose. So, how did this notorious rebel group come into being? Well, the LRA arose from a struggle between the Akoli tribes of northern Uganda and other tribes of southern Uganda under the dictatorship of Idi Amin Dada between 1971 and 1979. After Idi Amin was deposed, authority was passed to two equally ruthless Akoli chiefs, but the Akoli would be forced to escape to the north when Museveni took power in 1986. To oppose the Ugandan government, disgruntled Akoli troops founded the less radical Holy Spirit movement. But after their defeat in 1988, however, a more aggressive movement, the Lord's Resistance Army, emerged under the leadership of Joseph Kony. The LRA forces swiftly earned a reputation for murder, torture, rape, and mutilation, mainly against Akoli villages, as well as abducting tens of thousands of children for use as sex slaves and child soldiers throughout the years. A negotiated peace deal with the LRA would fail, triggering the coordinated onslaught by the government of Uganda, the DRC, and South Sudan. This resulted in the splitting of the LRA into smaller but more mobile groups across the border region, making them more difficult to locate. The LRA leader Joseph Kony was designated a global terrorist under the US executive order in 2008. The LRA is currently estimated to have between 200 to 300 combatants. In recent years, however, the group has carried out attacks in the DRC, South Sudan, and the CAR. Although the group is reportedly in decline, the LRA was said to have abducted 121 people and killed at least 3 others between April and June 2015, according to the United Nations report. Their leader, Joseph Kony, is still at large at the time of this video. And to know how the rebels captured and executed President Samuel Doe of Liberia in 1990, please check this video here. For more interesting African history stories, please like this video and consider subscribing to Hisple Media. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.